If you're new here, hi, I'm Leslyn. Welcome. Let's see, advice on anxiety about living alone for the first time as a single mom. Um, 696, I remember, welcome back. You know, first of all, what I'm going to tell you, how many kids? Um, not that, thanks, Kaylin, not that it matters necessarily, but it'll tell me how quickly you're going to be like spent, because I think being a single mother was the single hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. And I don't mean to scare you, I'm just keeping it real. Two kids. Um, so I'm going to say that you have to choose a couple of things. I'd say three things that you are going to enforce religiously, come hell or high water, because we know consistency is like critical in discipline and parenting, right? Pick three things that you are going to be consistent on no matter what. Three things that you know you're going to have the energy for, and let the rest of it go. Seriously. Just let the rest of it go, because at the end of the day, the rules don't matter as much as the consistency. And the fact that you are there, you love them, you care about them. Doesn't matter if they brush their teeth. It does, but you know what I mean. Um, it doesn't matter if their bed gets made. It doesn't matter if they wear sweatpants every day. It doesn't matter if they have peanut butter and jelly for dinner. Those things don't matter. What does matter is that you represent stability in their lives, and that in part of that stability is the consistency. But you're never going to be mom and dad, and so you're going to have to let things go. When my first husband died, our son was only 18 months old, and I had to jump in. We didn't have our affairs in order because we were so young, and I had to work like 60 hours a week. And I would pick him up from daycare, and I'd take him home, and we'd eat dinner, and then a babysitter would come, and I would go back out to work. And we would sit on the floor and eat at the coffee table. And I didn't care if he ate with his mouth open or chewed with his mouth open. I didn't care. I just didn't care, because what I did care about was that we talked about his day. That was really the only quality time that I got with him. Eventually I remarried, and I had three more kids, and then I divorced. And when I divorced their dad, my kids were, I think, 9, 12, 13, and then Frank was in college. Um, but the girls were 9, 12, and 13. And at that moment, they need consistency. And so the consistency is, you come home, you grab a snack, you get your homework. And there was no variation with that. If they got home from play practice, it was still the same thing. You grab a snack, or you eat your dinner, and you go right to homework. And I never varied in that. I won't say never, because I'm sure that there were times when I probably did. Come home from scouts, get a snack or eat, and go do your homework. But there were so many things that I didn't follow through with, because otherwise you're just yelling at them all the time. Um, so that's my best advice, and I hope that helps. Alexa, I've been in a relationship for 27 years. I'm so sorry. Um, and you're welcome, Stacy. I know that that's hard. I counsel a lot of people who are in a similar situation, and I know it's really, really hard. I think, don't forget that there's a lot of grief in that experience, even when you're mad and you want the relationship to end. If that's your case, um, it doesn't really matter. You still have to move through the grief process when something ends. and make sure you are gentle with yourself and take time to do that. 27 years he's been cheating over and over. Oh, I wish I could tell you. And I would, and what I'm going to say to you, and this is generally speaking, right? Somebody who is a serial cheater, I was married to one of them also, typically has pretty significant psychological dysfunction. We'll say stinking thinking, or we'll say that, you know, there's a lot of damage there. It could be pain, it could be damage, it could be narcissism, it could be so many things. It's probably not a deficiency in you by any standard, right? And I say probably because I don't know you, but I really, I can't ask or answer why. I can just say typically when we see somebody who is a serial cheater, it's because there's a deficiency there. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. I know firsthand how incredibly painful that is. You help your children deal with the separation by answering their questions honestly, but age appropriately, and by managing your emotions so that they are authentic but restrained. So what I mean by that is there are going to be days when you want to have just a flipping out crazy emotional experience, and you can do that, but you need to do that privately and not in front of your kids. You know, at the end of the day, I think the thing that was hardest for me was I had to remember that it was my marriage that was falling apart, but he was still their father. And they're two completely sets of expectations and understandings. And I wanted the kids to be mad at him for destroying our marriage, but that wasn't fair. I was mad at him for destroying our marriage. They were mad because he engaged in behavior that hurt the family, but at the end of the day, he had a house, they had bedrooms. Now, eventually he effed that up too. But my point is that in the beginning, what they needed to know is that their father was still their father. And I had to keep the pain of my marriage as separate as I could. Nobody's perfect at that I'm aware of. And there were days when I downright sucked at it, if I'm being honest. But do your best, because I think it's that important. How do you address a husband who gets mad when you tell him no to sex? He stays mad for days. I'm hesitating because I have a lot of energy on this particular topic. I talked about it just a little bit last week on my Monday Night Live. And then I talked about it over the weekend with some family members, and I have a lot to say about people people who believe that marriage serves as a mechanism for them to have sex whenever they want it. That's so patriarchal and misogynistic that it it nauseates me. Now, full disclosure, I was in a marriage like that. And I didn't understand until I got away from the marriage and I got some perspective and I went to grad school and I had an opportunity to really dive into kind of what the mechanics of that relationship and the expectations were. And to be honest, I think that there's so many problems with the way a lot of people have been raised. And that was part of our conversation over the weekend was I think that religion and church has through the years promoted this idea that sex had to happen inside of a marriage. And I know that it's not quite that strict anymore in most places, but because we promoted that, there's this subliminal expectation that marriage is a mechanism by which sex is a given. And too many men are raised with that understanding, and maybe women as well. And so we come into marriage, especially for those of us who are probably pre-1990 born, there's this idea that because I'm married, I have a responsibility to meet those needs, whether, and anyway, I don't even know if I have the energy to move through that discussion, to be fair. I'll try to come into a live with a little bit. I just started at 8 o'clock today. And I'm really energetic about that topic. So to answer your question, I would sit down on a good day, and I would just say, listen, I really want to talk to you about something. I want to be close to you, and I want to be when I feel really close to you, I want to get physical with you, but I need that closeness in order to really promote the physicality. And so if we could work on that, then I think the other is going to naturally follow. And let's talk about what we do to make that happen. Because I want to try, as your partner, I want to try and meet that need, but I'm just not going to dive in to the physical piece without these other pieces here. Actually, you know what I'm going to tell you? Go see a marriage counselor. And I say that because this is symbolic. That argument is often present in relationships that have more deeply rooted challenges. And it's going to be hard to come back from that without either a really good conversation between you, or if you really can't have that, I'm going to strongly recommend a third, like a mediating party to help with you. At the end of the day, you may spend a few $100s on marriage counseling, but it's going to be cheaper than a divorce attorney. And in the end, a much more enriching experience than being angry and bitter with each other because you couldn't see each other's needs getting met. So I hope that helps a little bit. It's a really hard discussion, but it is indicative. To get mad at you because I'm not going to have sex, that's a superficial problem. That's a symptom of something that's much more substantial. Just as a side note, look for a counselor who's trained in either EFT, emotional freedom techniques, or the Gottman method, Gottman. Both of them should be advertised. Go to Psychology Today, put in your zip code, look up couples marriage counseling, search for marriage counselors, and then read their bios. And with all due respect, I would not go to somebody young. I would go to somebody who has seemingly some experience, or at least some life experience, that they can pull from, so that there's a better connection. And it would probably it would probably do well to ask your husband if he would prefer a male or female, just so that he feels like he has some meat in the game, so to speak, or that when he goes in, he's willing to listen. Madison, hi. Oh my gosh, that's great. You helped me start to process your negative self-worth trauma associated with material items. Madison, negative self-worth, if you can really dive into that, you will be amazed at how much better your life gets. Really, it's amazing, because turning that around, and by the way, I'm not 100% convinced it ever completely goes like all the way back to normal, or to what the way it could have been, because I know that even today there are moments when I catch myself going, oh my gosh, that's, you're ridiculous, or nobody's gonna love you, or people have this opinion of you, or whatever kind of negative shit, we talk about. So I don't know that it completely goes away, but when you learn how to counter it and tell it to shut up and turn it off and distract from it, your life changes in really positive ways. So keep going. It's a journey worth taking, truly. Lily, what does scatterbrain mean? Scatterbrain means somebody who doesn't do a great job of staying focused and organizing their thoughts. I think people with ADD could be referenced as scatterbrained, although it's not a very sweet connotation. Scatterbrain means kind of disorganized and scattered. Like your thoughts are scattered across your mind. Squirrel. That's kind of scatterbrained. Or, oh God, where did I put my coffee? And I find it in the refrigerator. Or missing appointments because you didn't write them down, that kind of thing. Disorganized. A friend posted a video about why we're so critical. Why are we so critical of ourselves? Okay. So many people who are okay, makes you sharing, just sharing. It is sad when people that we thought were our friends don't follow through with friendship. I have a similar situation happening in a weird way. Somebody is holding me accountable for 100%, seemingly 100% of the energy that goes into our connection. And I'm like, I'm not going to be responsible. I can't carry the friendship by myself. And, I reached out and I said, hey, give me a call when you get a chance. And then next thing I know, somebody's getting a message that I never tried I never reached out again. Like, they never called, but they're mad at me because I didn't keep reaching out. I think that's, I mean, you know what it is it's a sign that somebody is hurting. But we can't all take on everybody's pain. And at some point, we have to individually be accountable in our relationships, both in our intimate relationships, in our familial relationships, and in our friendships. It has to be not 50-50 equal. Nothing's ever 50-50, but it has to be reciprocal to some extent. I feel that when my ex would tell me I feel that way when my ex would tell me everything that you did wrong. You mean about self-critical? I just had this conversation with somebody tonight. Well, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I had it twice today because one of my clients grew up with a very critical mom. And what's interesting is, even though she's a grown woman who's done a lot of personal work, every time one of her other family members says, why would you do it like that? Or why did you do it like that? Maybe they're just asking. Maybe they're just curious. That's a trigger for her. And she goes instantly into this mode of, well, I must have been wrong. I must have done it wrong. You accused me of being wrong. And I find it really sad that we live in a culture where everything is tied to this right and wrong, which I also blame religion for, by the way. That we can't just be a society of differences, that we have to literally pull everything down to, I have to be right or I'm not good enough. Again, in my family dynamic, I developed a reputation of being a hard game player and being what other people perceived as upset if I didn't win. And I guess this is over the years, and people are still, well, be careful, Leslyn has to win. Well, Leslyn does not have to win. And what's interesting is nobody ever said, hey, what do you feel when you lose? Nobody ever said that. Everybody took their own interpretation of my behavior and applied it to me, which frankly pisses me off. But I understand that's a big part of human nature. But the fact of the matter is, I love puzzles. I love puzzles. I love strategic games. And if I'm going to play, I am going to try to win. What's the point in playing? I mean, to have fun. But yes, I mean, the fun is figuring out the puzzle. Now, I don't care. I don't care if somebody figures out the puzzle or wins the game ahead of me. But I do sit there and think, how could I have done that better? What could I have done to solve that puzzle faster? I like escape rooms. Not one time have I ever gone to an escape room and not had to call for help. I don't care about losing, but I love the challenge of the puzzle or the strategy. And if anybody had ever just thought to ask me what was happening in my head, they would have understood that I was trying to go back and figure out how I could have put the puzzle together better. I wanted to know, how could I play the game better? Not so that I necessarily could win, although, maybe I'm splitting hairs and not being honest with myself, but I think that it's really about, how could I have put the puzzle together better? Bluey, I found a video on your FYP of your 13-year-old daughter kissing a girl. You have no idea how to handle that. I would just tell her, hey, I saw your video. Do you want to tell me what was going on for you, or is that, is this something that you do, or um I will say this. Sometimes, I mean, I want to encourage you to say just very gently, without judgment, hey, I saw your video on TikTok where you kissed a blonde girl. You want to talk about that with me? And I personally, I would make it more about, why did you think it was okay to put that on social media versus the kissing the girl. I think your daughter kissing a girl is probably, to be honest, just a very normal kind of curiosity. Maybe they did it as a bet, maybe they, or a dare. Um, it could be a little attention seeking. It could be so many things. So I would ask her about it. And one of the techniques that I used, if I had a really serious question to ask my girls, is I would take them for a drive. We'd go get ice cream, or we'd go shopping or something. And the reason I did that is because if I was staring at the, straight ahead at the road and not at them, I think it was less threatening. But I definitely would make no assumptions. I would just ask, and I would say, hey, you want to tell me more about that? And see what she says. And hopefully if she says I was just experimenting, I'm wondering how I feel about my sexuality, open the door to the conversation. Although I would recommend that she doesn't necessarily use social media as a platform for sharing that part of herself at 13. If she wants to grow up and do that, that's a whole nother story. But I think at 13, that's a pretty fair boundary. Experts at negative self-talks and unable to accept compliments, self-esteem issues, I suppose. They are self-esteem issues. And, I know that my content in the last couple of days has talked a little bit about self-esteem. It is the one thing that is a go-to if nothing really can grow until you start growing the self-esteem. Because without the self-esteem, it's almost like it's the floorboard for all of the other parts of the construction of the self. You can do things simultaneously, and one might argue that you almost have to do some things simultaneously, but it's the foundation. This sense of self is the foundation. So do whatever you have to do to address that. There's a book, let me think for a second. What to say. Oh boy, it's on my website. If you go to my bio and you click on the link in my bio for my website, and you go to ThisIsLeslyn.com, and you click on recommended reading, there's a book, I think it's Richard Carlson, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. I think that's the name of the book. And it addresses negative self-talk in a really positive way. So if you're up for it, put it on your Christmas list, check it out at the library. If negative self-talk is an issue, read that book. I tell people probably at least once a week, if you can't afford therapy, you don't have to stay stuck. There are a million self-help books out there. You read them, you study them, you try them, and you go on to the next one. And if maybe every self-help book only gives you a paragraph that you can really relate to, in which case focus on that and then get up and move on. ultimately what you're going to see is that they all kind of say the same thing. They just say it in a different way. Lack of mutuality. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, Amy, a friendship that's not mutual isn't a friendship. And it's just not. For my friend, I always thought we were the kind of friends that could just pick up wherever we left off. To be honest, if I look at my text messages, she hasn't reached out very much. I didn't hold it against her. I've been super busy. She's apparently going through something, and I'm going to make an effort to reach out one more time and say, hey, listen, I'm not going to accept complete responsibility for this. It has to be a two-way street. I don't have that kind of energy. And it's not like I have too many friends, but I don't have enough time to put that kind of energy into all of my friendships. So if there's not something coming back, I bid you adieu. I love you. You were amazing walking with you at that particular time of my life. No grudges. People move on. And I don't know how old you are, but if I think about the number of people that I've been friends with in my life, and then there's been a shift in the energy, and we just parted ways and we didn't even talk about it. There was a shift in the energy, and it's not because there's something wrong with either one of you. It's just that you got to a fork in the road and you each took a different path. And I think that's okay. We don't have to take it personally and think that there was something wrong with us unless they brought something to our attention and we weren't open to receiving it. That's it. And if that's the case, then own it and move on. And if you brought something you brought something to their attention, they weren't open to receiving it, or vice versa. It doesn't sound like that was the case. So I'm going to say, try not to internalize this. That also happens, by the way, with all of us who have low self-esteem, is we sit back and we're like, what did I do? Why am I not good enough? What did I do wrong? And maybe it's not, you didn't do anything wrong at all. Maybe they just got to a fork in the road and you weren't paying attention, and they went that way and you went that way, and you look back and you're like, oh, where'd they go? And maybe they're thinking the same thing. Oh, where'd they go? I just want to say that can be part of life. I don't mean to be dismissive. I know it's uncomfortable and sometimes it just downright hurts. So being dismissive is not the energy I'm trying to share. It's really about, don't internalize it and accept that while that friend isn't there anymore, they may have played a very important role in your life for a period of time, and I want to encourage you to be super grateful for that. And don't forget to go read the poem A Reason, a Season, and a Lifetime, because it's beautiful and it kind of applies to things like this. Mama Shellish, her ex-son-in-law is moving in, girlfriend of 7 years. Her kids, 13, 15, have no rules. Your grandson, 10, does have rules. Strict rules. Thank you. Thank you, Tint Mom. Strict rules. Afraid he's going to have negative feelings for grandson. It's going to have negative... Let's see. Strict rules. Have no rules. My grandson has strict rules. So essentially, if I understand your question, you're afraid that your grandson is going to see his step siblings, or whatever they are, not have any rules and feel resentful that he does have rules. So I'm assuming that he's only with his dad half the time, in which case it's a matter of at mom's house, he has strict rules. At dad's house, I'm assuming he was good at co-parenting, and maybe now he's not going to be, or whatever that is. But whatever the case is, what happens at dad's house is it's dad's house. What happens at mom's house and at your house, if it's the same, or you're just being supportive of your daughter, kids can have different rules in different houses. That's not a, I mean, some people would say that's a problem, but I would say that that's very common. And if, they're probably at some point going to say, I want to live with dad, he doesn't have any rules. But I think I would encourage you to talk about why the rules are there. And strict rules, I mean, that we could probably talk a little bit about what that means. And if strict rules, why are there strict rules? Are they still necessary? Are they too strict? There's so many questions. I have so many questions. But you also could recommend that they go back and do some co-parent counseling about this new dynamic and how it's going to impact the 10-year-old. There's so many variables. I'm not sure that I can really pinpoint all of them here, but it doesn't have to be a horrible thing. Maybe that's what I want to say, that I think your daughter's job, because it's ultimately her job, is to really talk about why she has rules, demonstrate the value and the value behind the rules, and try to teach that and support and encourage the value that those rules are based on. Off the top of my tired head. Dad's house has strict rules. Afraid he's still going to have strict rules and the others won't. Okay. Hello, Whimsy. How are you? Mama Shellis, this is what I'm going to say to you. One of the most maddening things about divorced families and co-parenting is when mom and dad can't get on the same page, and the other parent's behavior is off-putting or what we consider destructive, and yet we have no power. We just don't. We don't have any power. I've had families in my office where dad refused to enforce bedtimes. And even like when it was his Sunday, he would drop the kids off to school on Monday, but they were allowed to stay up till 2 a.m. And mom was infuriated and tried to take him to court over this. They got co-parenting classes. They were required to have co-parenting classes, which I finally stopped doing because that was like beating my head against a brick wall. So God bless any of my fellow therapists who do co-parenting counseling. I mean, I've seen so many things, and ultimately what I really came to believe is that, and this was especially true in my case, I had to just refocus my attention on being the best version of myself that I could be for my children. I had to stop worrying what was happening over there and just hyper focused on being the best mother I could be, which meant being the best version of myself. And so that's what I did. And you know what happened? All 3 girls ended up saying, Mom, we don't want to go to Dad's. At some point, all of them just begged me to let them stay home. And fortunately, that's what happened. I didn't have to go to court for that. he didn't fight it, which probably tells you a whole lot right there. But it just robs you of so much energy and so much joy. And then, because we're human, we say shitty things in front of our kids, and that doesn't put us in a good light. It doesn't put the other parent in a good light. It's just really more beneficial to focus on being the best version of yourself that you can be. And consequently, you'll be a better mom. Hi, Marie. Any suggestions for severe repetitive thoughts? I don't know what you mean by severe repetitive thoughts. If they're any indicate, like if a severe thought, what comes to my mind immediately is self-harm, or harm of someone else. And if that's the case, I'm going to strongly recommend that you reach out to a hotline, if it's not, or go to the hospital. If it's not that severe, then there's an interesting podcast. So grab a pencil and paper, or pull out your phone and text yourself a note. I'm pretty sure it's called Dark Thoughts, and it's on NPR's, I want to say memorabilia, but that's not what it is. It's, maybe do a Google search for NPR Dark Thoughts podcast. It's not memorabilia, but maybe you guys know what it is. Anyway, it's a psychologist who talks about thoughts, and repetitive thoughts in particular could be a sign of OCD, which is anxiety, which is a bigger problem, and I would recommend that you see a therapist. You can also read some books, but I think that if there's severe repetitive thoughts, that indicates to me that there might be an OCD issue. There could be just a generalized anxiety disorder. Some medication might help with that while you investigate where those thoughts are coming from and why they're there. Alexa, does journaling help? I just feel so sad all the time between my separation and your dad's passing.
Here's something I found on the web. According to yourtango.com, journaling frequently can help to improve your mood and make you more positive. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Thanks for your feedback.
So, there you go. I hope you heard that. Lexi over here says that yes, I mean, journaling does help. Journaling is one of the things that you can do to help. I want to encourage you to see a therapist, though, because those are two big deals. A separation of your relationship and the passing of a father, both things are instrumental losses in the life of a woman. And I wouldn't want anybody to diminish the significance of those things. Both require some element of grieving, and journaling can help with grieving. But if you're not actively processing the pain of those experiences, it could lead to bigger problems down the road, especially in relationships. So please consider talking to a therapist. Make sure a licensed therapist, and check with your employer, see if they have an EAP. If money is an issue, look for somebody who does sliding scale based on your tax returns. I I understand it's a commitment financially, but I say to people, what is the price of your mental health? Like, what is the value of your mental health? It's priceless. So whatever you have to do to be able to talk that through with somebody, please try to go do it. Starting to feel holiday anxiety, too many events, concerns about COVID and staying well. Yeah, you guys, here's my recommendation. Let go. I want to encourage you to ask yourself, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I putting so much pressure on myself that it's impacting my physiology? Like, why? And trust me, I do this. I stress myself out sometimes. And then I'm very quick anymore to go, what are you doing, Les? What are you doing? The world is not going to end because you said no to that commitment or you didn't make it to that meeting on time. The world is not going to end. My world, as I know it, will not suffer long term if I stop this or say no to that or give up this or cancel that. It's just not. And it's just, we just put so much pressure. I feel like I should show you what the room looks like in front of me, because I had a whole bunch of Christmas presents come in, so I unboxed them and I stacked them up over on that side of the room. Well, I guess it's really just this side of the room that's so bad. My daughter helped me get the Christmas stuff up in the basement, so I have boxes and bins. I was on the phone with my grandson yesterday, and they put their tree up, and he said, Mimi, do you have your tree? And I said, well, it's in a box. So I came out and I untaped the box and showed him, and then I went through some of the ornaments that I showed him. And a bunch of stuff that I had that goes back down in the basement is piled up. Who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It'll get done. And, it always does. It always does. We rush around like we've never done this before. You've been through a few Christmases. And it always gets done. Even if, one year I mailed my Christmas cards out like on the 30th of December. Nobody criticized me. They're like, oh, I finally got your Christmas card. Yay. It doesn't matter. Hello, Baking. Good to see you. Yes. That's right, Kaylin. I mean, it just doesn't matter. I also am like into minimalism. And you probably wouldn't say that if you saw my house, but it stresses. I mean, too much stuff is just stressful. And compared to most of my friends, I have decorations in one room. My best friend down in Virginia said it took her 2 weeks to decorate. I said, oh my gosh. And I guess I haven't been down there in forever at Christmas. And I said, I just can't even imagine having that kind of time. And I don't think, even if I did have that kind of time, I don't think that I would decorate for Christmas. I see people posting all these pictures. I jumped onto Facebook the other day, and I'm like, I'm just not doing it. And Mitch, you're right, but that's a standard that you have to ask yourself, is the cost worth the payoff? Like, if the cost is me feeling like a failure, that's a pretty hefty cost. How long have I been a therapist? Hi, advocate. I've been a therapist for 11 years. It's a second career for me. I was a financial advisor for almost 20 years. I went through a pretty ugly divorce and had an opportunity to reinvent myself, or I'll say reinvent myself. And I just came to a decision that all of the things that I had experienced in my life, I could make sense of, or I could give meaning to, if I could use what I learned from them to help other people. And so I'd never finished my degree, so I went back to school and finished my undergrad. I got a degree in psychology, and then I went right into grad school to become a mental health counselor. And I wanted those credentials so that, aside from my life experience, I had the education to support what I was sharing. And that was, I was 50 when I opened my practice, so it was 11 years ago. Don't get overly stressed about much anymore. Realize a lot of things just aren't that critical. Yeah, and it's funny how certain life events, if not age, thanks so much, Keisha. It's funny how things in life, different events in life, and ultimately I think age, just kind of center you in can center you in this space where you maybe have a different perspective of what's important. To be frank, if I'm going to be honest, I used to bust my butt. And I mean bust my butt. I had a big, beautiful house. We didn't have any money when, we were house poor. And so I wrapped boxes, empty boxes. I wrapped and got these big bows, and everywhere in my house there were just these big piles of boxes that were wrapped. And I remember the first time I did it, I walked through the house and I'm like, Jesus, Louises, I live at Macy's, because that's what it felt like. And there were just, that was kind of funny. I would have all these lights all over, and when I moved and downsized, I was hell bent on getting rid of all of those decorations, because this house is so much smaller and full. It just on a regular basis, this house is not overly full, but it's full. And I almost have to put like half the things away in order to pull the Christmas stuff out. And over the last 5 years, I've been slowly but surely completely getting different Christmas stuff. And I just pick up a piece here and there throughout the year. And so it's much softer. I only decorate with silver and gold and white. So it's a very different look. Is OCD and ADHD hereditary? I don't know. They're very different things. And it's probably ADHD. I think ADHD is more of a brain organization change than OCD is, but I'm not 100% positive of that. And I would say it would probably be safe to say somewhere in the genome there's probably a marker. But if I'm not mistaken, markers only suggest, depending on if they're turned on, that you are more susceptible to that, because OCD in particular is behavioral, whereas ADHD I think is more chemical. But I'm not an expert in ADHD, so you're getting my guess at the moment. They are genetic predisposition. Okay, good. They are genetic predispositions. Yeah, I mean, please stop talking. I don't know. Are you talking to me? I think I said that I think I said that they could be genetically if the marker is turned on, but I'm not 100% sure that that's true for OCD. OCD is an anxiety disorder. There's a lot we don't know yet about anxiety, although I'm not a geneticist, so I think I did say I don't know. Actually, Gigi, that's an excellent, excellent point. Do not leave an ADHD diagnosis up to a therapist, especially a master's level therapist. You need a psychologist who can run the appropriate cognitive test, and then you need a neurologist to look at the brain. That's a really, really good point. Thank you for that. And Keisha, master's level therapists and pediatricians do not have the specialized training required to officially give you that diagnosis. I mean, I suppose that's not completely true, because at the end of the day, I can look at the DSM and assess whether or not you fit the diagnostic criteria. But I think that Gigi is 100% correct that if you want the fMRI imaging is the key. I also think that the more people, here I go with the database thing, right? The reason that we're starting to learn so much is because we can image the brain and correlate those images to behavior. And that's where true hard science meets behavior science, which is soft. And we're on the cusp of that. So it's one of the reasons that the research or the data has been pouring out of labs over the last 10 years, because fMRIs have been so instrumental. The research that I love is the look of stress on brains. And it's fascinating to me, and we just don't give enough credit to all of all of that data. It's fascinating to me. Therapists cut you off and you've accepted not reaching out, but still think about it every day. Corgi, go to a different therapist. Seriously. Sometimes a therapist is like dating. Finding a therapist is just like dating. You have to go to a couple to find one that's a good fit. So I want to strongly recommend that if you still feel like you need to reach out, by all means, make another effort. Any wise advice for provisional therapist? Hello, Jelena. Wise advice. Yes, this is the advice, probably some of the best advice that I had to kind of figure out. Um, be the kind of therapist that you want to be. And what I mean by that is I found that as a new therapist, and I see this in people that I supervise, as a new therapist, I was so caught up in wanting people to use me, to like me, to pay me, to build my business, that I found myself trying to accommodate every client, almost like a chameleon, to be so eclectic and so moldable that I could fit all of these needs. And I remember sitting in supervision one time, not quite in tears, but really questioning, like, why did I spend all this time and money if I'm not going to love what I do? And he said, well, why don't you love it? And when we started digesting that, it was almost like I was in this codependent pattern with my own clients. I just gave them what they wanted instead of what became authentic for me, which is so ironic. And I was unaware of it. Now, mind you, I had been super codependent in my relationship leading up to that. So maybe it was more about that than it was anything else. But the minute I shifted and stayed really consistently authentic to the kind of therapist that I wanted to be, the whole thing changed. And not everybody is a good fit for me. I've had plenty of people who say, I don't really like your style, which is fine because I have a full practice of people who love me, and I don't want it to sound like I'm practicing for their adoration, because that's not it. But I have a whole practice full of clients who seek my advice, who feel or tell me that I was helping or am helping them. I said to somebody last week, listen, I'm pretty sure you're not going to like what I'm about to say. She goes, just give it to me. Come on, that's why I love you. And I'm like, okay, here it is. And so it's that authenticity that creates the connection. And if you're authentically eclectic, fine. But if you're not, the single best advice is to be yourself. And then to, almost like you're doing your rotation in medical school, do the rounds, do a little bit of everything, and then pay attention to and develop intention with or awareness of what you feel passionate about. And eventually you'll start saying no to certain kinds of clients. Like, I don't work with children under 16. I don't do co-parenting counseling. I don't do anger management. I don't do, let's see, what else don't I do? I don't do a ton of infidelity work. And I will assess that condition when it comes up in marriage counseling. I don't work with severe mental illness because I'm really good when it comes to personal growth coaching, to anxiety, and to couples therapy. I don't do eating disorders. So it sounds like I don't do a ton of stuff. But there are so many other people who do, and so we just kind of all balance out. Do I work with narcissists? Incidentally. So if somebody comes to me and says, I've been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, Can you treat that? I say no. I really think that DBT is the better treatment modality for cluster B disorders, and I'm not trained in DBT. I have a little bit of continuing ed, but I'm not trained. And yes, I do work with people who are coming out of narcissistic abuse, or who are with narcissists and need to come out of narcissistic relationships. So there's my authentic questions for the day. I just saw the light go out in the other room, which means it's 10:30. So cheers, you guys. I didn't even get through a whole glass of wine.